And what's up, orange and blue today? Cecil Lammey, Andrew Mason here in Frisco, Texas. We got done with the second day of Shrine Bowl practices. And Mason, before we jump into the stars of the day, it's so important to note how when we're at these all-star games, day one is exciting. We see the guys that pop. But day two might be more important because those day one stars need to continue that progress in day two. And I don't know how many times we've seen a guy that shines on the first day kind of fades the second and third day, or guys that struggle the first day that continue to get better during the week of practice, like one Bo Nix did last year at the Senior Bowl.
I mean, I'd say we've probably seen it happen every year we've been at these things. The first day, stand out who flames out a little bit as it goes on, but then the players that rise up. I mean, you mentioned Bo Nix, and that's a great example of somebody who took the teaching, applied it, and got better. But at the same time, if you start fast and then you build on that, and we're going to get into some guys who did that today,
yes,
then that's where you're almost kind of making the evaluation easy in terms of what you can do in a pro style environment and how you show the capacity for improvement that you're going to have if you're going to succeed at the next level. Because ultimately with these guys, especially here at the Shrine, it very much is projection and projecting them out a year or two from now once they've had that teaching. Yeah,
project them out, see where they can start, but it's not where they finish. And let's start with those day two guys that followed up their day one performance, including Luke Lachey.
Yes.
I thought it was another strong day from the Iowa tight end. Lots of talk on the sidelines about, his inspiration was Sam Laporta. How does that work out? Does he recover? Combine injury report's going to be really big for Luke Lachey, but out there looking good. Maybe he doesn't have all his speed regained that he did back in, let's say, 2022 as a young player, but a few years now, a couple years removed from that 2023 injury, Luke Lachey's out there impressing scouts and looks like a fine day three value, not moving into day two, but a day three value pick, let's say in the fifth round.
Well, he had a right ankle injury, and the rehab was basically like 5 to 6 months. And he had that in the 2023 season. So sort of the standard operating procedure for players coming off of severe injuries is that first year, they're not all the way back. But then the second year, that's when you're hoping they'll be, I say hoping because that was sort of the Broncos' aspiration for Javonte Williams.
Right.
That unfortunately didn't work out this past year. But, Lachey, now that he's past the 2024 season, now he looks more like the guy that was being talked about a couple of years back as, who's next from the Iowa tight end factory.
Mm-hmm.
And Lachey's name was coming up, and really just it's appropriate that he built off that because we learned something about how he has a thing for building blocks, as it were.
Yes.
Because he is a Lego enthusiast, like a serious Lego enthusiast.
Yes.
Like he's like that's what he does in his spare time, is build huge Lego projects. So he's bought the Titanic, 9,090 pieces.
Yes. Hasn't put it together yet.
Yes.
But he's waiting anxiously to do so.
Yeah.
So.
But just kind of, in terms of an overall all-around tight end, fits what you're looking for. Fairly dependable blocker, understands the importance of that. Now, and we talked about the play that he had yesterday,
the seam ripper play.
The seam ripper play.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in 7-on-7, so obviously you've got a favorable setup there for the tight end. But one thing I did like about him, and we'll get into a tight end on the East as well that I saw this from, is the ability to quickly identify coverage and find, particularly zones, and find the gaps downfield. And that's something that's a higher level of savvy, and that's something that, especially if you're going to succeed in Sean Payne's offense, you have to be able to find those gaps in coverage.
Right. Let's give people a taste, if you will, Mason. Press that beautiful bean footage for the seam ripper from Luke Lachey.
There you go. Sorry, that was a little slow there. I was finding the clip.
Yeah, simple, elegant, beautiful. That's what you see from Lachey. What is our second Lachey clip I see that we have here?
Just another, more of a B-roll type of clip. We'll roll it here. Just another glimpse of it. That was in the one-on-one drill toward the end of practice on Saturday.
Okay.
So when they were doing like trying to decide who's going to do, push-ups and sit-ups and whatever at the end of practice.
Right. Some fun at the end of today's practice with big men trying to catch from the jugs machine on a punt return. So had offensive lineman, defensive lineman out there.
Moral of the story that we learned today, if
we had to play it twice.
So, my bad. That's what happens when you graze the touchpad here, basically, and play it again. I'll keep my hands away. Keep back away from the StreamYard. But the thing they were doing was, you're trying to decide, who's gonna, whether you're going to do push-ups, sit-ups, whatever. And you had O linemen and D linemen catching punts. And the lesson that we learned is if you're an O lineman or D lineman and you're not experienced in fielding a punt, don't add a layer of complication to it. You don't have to call for the fair catch, because there was one guy who did. And then, of course, it was a little too much for somebody without experience.
Yes.
And he dropped the ball from the jugs.
Life and footballs can come at you quickly.
Yes.
So another player that backed up his day one performance with day two work was Chandler Martin. Not perhaps as impactful, but certainly wasn't out of position. Multiple times that you and I looked over at each other, are like, yep, there's Martin again. Yep. He's getting it done. Another good day from him. When
you're always around the ball, you're going to get noticed, because that's, again, it's one of those uncoachable traits. With Chandler Martin, what you see is somebody who appears to possess the instincts and the quick processor to identify an attack. And I feel like I'm going into, water boy.
Yes.
To see what's happening, see where the play is going. And the other thing on Chandler Martin is you don't see him caught out of position that often either. Mm-hmm. Like, his reads were generally spot on today. He wasn't knocking anybody to the ground today. It wasn't as dynamic. And you could sometimes see he was almost holding up a little bit sometimes to avoid that big hit, something that you're not going to have to do in the games. But if you're putting yourself in the right place as consistently as Chandler Martin is, you're going to have a future in this league. And look, inside linebacker is a spot where the Broncos, they need to improve. The one thing I'll say is I haven't seen enough of him in coverage yet. And I think when we're talking about Chandler Martin, we're talking more about somebody who's going to work against the run in the box and prevent runs from getting beyond the second level.
Yes.
That's what we were seeing. Like, when I say he was in the right place, he was making sure that if a guy had a hole up the middle, 3 yards, stop. And that's a skill as well. And that's something that we saw the Broncos struggle at from time to time, especially down the stretch.
They did. You almost went Henry Winkler on us. Visualize and attack.
Yes.
That's the key there. Now, you mentioned I've got 2 stars from the West I'd like to talk about, and then 4 from the East that I would bring up in just a little bit. But you mentioned stuffing the run. Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle, Maryland. A lot of conversation again about who's your run stuffers, who's your day 3, 5th, 6th, 7th round guys. Phillips, a player working his way up. Certainly, it looks like a day 3 pick for a lot of these guys. But Phillips was a player now for 2 days. We didn't talk about him yesterday, but today I feel with back-to-back days, we need to bring him up.
You just kept seeing him in the backfield time after time.
That single digit, right?
Yes. Hard to miss a guy wearing jersey number 8 who consistently is working the lineman he's going against. Really good. Like, you'd see him kind of come across the body of the guard quite a bit. So one thing I liked about him, it wasn't just his quickness, but it was his quickness to change direction and make sure that he and take the right path into the backfield. Like, that's, again, this isn't like an urgent need. The Broncos, I think, they can put together a pretty solid starting defensive line, even if DJ Jones moves on. But you got to work on some depth here up front,
right?
Beyond what right now is projecting is Malcolm Roach, John Franklin Myers, and Zach Allen starting, and it's one of those positions where you can't have it be too fortified.
Right.
So that's another position. It's kind of a lower key need is defensive line depth, especially very similar to the linebacker position. We're talking about getting shredded there down the stretch.
Yeah.
That's something you got to work on.
Can the Broncos strengthen that with a guy like Jordan Phillips? And then just super quick, because again, running backs, you can't really tell. There's no live tackling. There is some thumping, but I wanted to see how Taj Brooks looked on field. And I felt as a receiver, let's be nice, Mace. The quarterback play here at the Shrine Bowl, it's not great, Bob. But when you see Taj Brooks out there, there's a play, specifically a swing pass to the left to our sideline where we're standing. Brooks has to go down to get the ball, catches it, keeps it from being an incompletion, and then is able to continue the play. That made it into my notebook. And just Brooks in 2 days as a receiver, I liked what I've seen. We know that he's a power back from Texas Tech. You're not going to be able to see that. His speed, which isn't great, doesn't look out of sorts. He doesn't look too slow. We've seen some sluggish backs even here. So Brooks kind of checks that box in terms of enough speed. But Mace, I was mainly focused on what he did as a receiver. And while not, wow, what a great receiver, I feel he kind of maybe answered some of those questions.
I thought he did it. I thought he did as well, him. And then on the other side, a guy who I thought flashed, and I wasn't necessarily expecting it, was Crossy Meritt from Arizona.
Best back here.
Yes. And had one bad moment where he dropped the ball there later on in the practice.
He was upset about it.
Yeah, very upset. But the thing, generally good pass catching ability. Another thing I liked about him was the balance that he had. He stayed upright. The first contact didn't knock him down. He was able to keep his feet, get through the hole, keep momentum going. And I think when you're talking about running backs here, these are both round 4, round 5 type of guys.
Sure.
But Crossy Meritt and Taj Brooks, I think, are the ones who are RB1 and 1A down here.
Yeah, and Crossy Meritt, make sure I get that right.
Crossy, not Croxy.
Yes, Crossy Meritt. He also
JCM.
I like that. They have JFM, get a JCM.
Yeah.
So they did some RPO stuff where he was really patient finding the lanes, and then boom, he was like through the hole. So I wrote in my notes about his patience. I liked his vision. You mentioned his contact balance because there is some thumping, and you like all of that. And as a receiver, I mean, he's a guy. You show up at these all-star games and it's a job interview. I think JCM has certainly
he nailed it,
catapulted to the top in that job interview. Yeah. So loved what you saw this week on the east side there.
Yeah, that's 2 running backs who I think can step in as day 3 guys, and wherever they go, they can help you.
Right. Now another East star, Kobe Bryant, cornerback from Kansas. We talked to him yesterday. I mean, my God, the dude loves to talk. I don't know if you saw our buddy Chris Harris, and shout out CHJ because he's the best. He tweeted out, somebody had tweeted some of the film of practice of Kobe Bryant from yesterday. And our guy CHJ took to Twitter and he's like, I'm telling you, first round, CHJ, love you, brother. Not the first round, but Kobe Bryant's one of those guys that's going to make you regret not taking him earlier than he goes. Again, probably like a mid-round, let's say 3rd right now for Kobe Bryant. But 171 pounds of feistiness.
Yeah, feistiness and ball skills.
Yes.
Had an interception today, no surprise. He's had 2 4-interception seasons the past couple of years for Kansas. And just the energy that he brings to the equation. Like, that's the thing. Like, you see him in the huddle and he's like, here he is with guys and he's just getting to know and he's getting them all jacked up.
Right.
Like, that's, and the atmosphere and the attitude, a lot
of flair.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant.
He's got some pieces of flair on him, so to speak, but he's got the attitude that you want. And actually you go back to the CU game and where he came up big and he showed it there going up against Travis Hunter, and the way he was talking about going against Travis Hunter, like this is a guy who fears nobody that he's going to go against. Because he was asked who he wants to face in the NFL. Jamar Chase. Like, he just went
immediately.
Right there. He went right there
to
league-wide wide receiver one. Jamar Chase. Like, I want to see him. Like, I like that kind of attitude. Mm-hmm. Now, he'll have to refine himself technically, but the ball skills, the quick reaction when it's in his area, you can't coach that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, lots of heart, lots of fire.
I was impressed. I was hoping to see something good from him this week, and I wasn't disappointed. Yes, not a first rounder. I think it might be tough for him to sneak into day two, just because I know at 171 teams are probably going to be like, okay, you might get bulled around a little bit. Can you get another 10, 12 pounds on? Like, that's going to be something that I think a team's going to emphasize to try to add some more muscle without compromising his quickness and speed. If you can do that, you got a player in this guy.
A couple more players from the East I'd like to talk about. Warren Brinson, at the end of practice, you and I kept getting on the field as this scrum kind of moved closer as they went down the field.
Throwing people around.
And he had, I believe, two batted passes at the line on shorter plays. One was a wide receiver screen. One was like an out route.
Yeah.
And he's just huge man, does this, knocks the ball down, throwing people around, Mace. Very impressive from Georgia.
Yeah, and very much looking the part. Like, you're down here, because there's a wider variance in quality of players. This is where it's going to be a little bit easier to see guys kind of jump out and say, okay, this guy's a player. He's the old cliche man among boys. That's what he was out there today.
Yes, for sure.
But again, and getting stronger. Day looked a little tentative to me when I went back and rewatched day one. I watched some of the clips I got when I'm kind of shooting tackle to tackle. Very aggressive today.
Yeah, very aggressive. Nice way to finish practice. And then the last player I want to talk about, and we've seen this before, although it's not the same guy.
Yeah.
It's Efton Chisholm, the wide receiver from Eastern Washington.
Okay.
And it's 29 on the field, number one in your hearts. I did hear some people behind me saying, like, that's like Cooper Kupp. Well, he played where Cooper Kupp did. And on film, it's terrible to watch because of that red turf. Efton Chisholm, to me, reminds me more of Danny Amendola. When I saw Amendola at the Texas versus Nation game years ago at El Paso, that's a similar type of player. He's not Cooper Kupp, okay? He's not Cooper Kupp. But Efton Chisholm is the name you have to know. If you want a slot receiver, and I think the Broncos may be interested in, plus you mentioned the blocking, like he's an effort guy. He's a smaller receiver, but he's an effort guy. You had no problem on the run plays. And I even put in my notes how he had good timing, because as a receiver, you can't start blocking immediately in your route. You have to fake it, because the ball hasn't been tossed or handed off yet. You saw with Chisholm is that he would do like he's running a route, making it look the same as if he was going to try to be open for a pass, but then at the last second would jut those hands up, would block his man. And again, he's not big.
Yeah.
And, not that overly aggressive, but very good technique. And that's as a blocker. Now, the one thing I will say, Mace, is that Chisholm disappeared in team drills.
Yeah.
And that's where he was blocking. So I'm not sure if it was a guy that just did good in 7-on-7 and 1-on-1. So not Cooper Kupp. Be very clear about that. But maybe a Danny Amendola type.
Well, it's funny because another guy who caught my eye in the blocking aspect of receiver was Isaiah Naor from Nebraska.
Oh, yeah.
He actually transferred over from Wyoming.
Yes. Yep.
He did. And he first jumped out to me when I'm watching him, block on some tunnel screens, block for running backs, and how he was kind of getting out into space. Very good fundamentally at that. And then he actually did go out there late and made some plays in team as well. So he was kind of able to build on that. It's not maybe the most dynamic thing, but you have to watch blocking if you're trying to figure out what the Broncos are going to do, because blocking as a receiver is the ticket to playing time. It is part of the entry fee if you're going to get in there. And so when you see that from Chisholm, you see that from Nair, it's like, okay, let's take a second look at these guys. I'd like to see what Chisholm does, even though I don't put too much on the game, either this game or the Senior Bowl game itself. I still want to see what he does in kind of a game environment that might actually illuminate him a little bit more.
Okay, and maybe because you brought him up, the Nebraska kid, the size. So maybe give Sean Payton, I'm not saying Twitter painted, but like when you're a larger receiver, and the thing about, and I always call him the Nebraska kid, Naor, is that he would take 2 steps and would be at top speed.
Yeah.
So a larger receiver with a long stride, usually I don't like long strided guys because they can get tripped up very easily. But you saw with his speed, it's 1, 2, and he's off. So he's got size, my ball mentality, he's got blocking ability, and you liked what you saw there. Now in 2 days of practice.
6'4", 222, and a wingspan of over 83 inches.
Think Sean Payton's going to like that?
I think he'll take note. I think he's going to take notice of that. Another guy I want to kind of talk about it's a tight end, but in terms of big wingspan, was Rivaldo Fairweather out of Auburn, who again had some catches today. Now, not somebody who projects as a blocker, although he was listed by Auburn, I believe, at 236, and he weighed in at 246 pounds. He, too, is another. He's 6'3". He's got an 83-inch wingspan as well. And so traits. Now, obviously, the football IQ, football character is what you're looking for, but you're also looking for length. Mm-hmm. If you're Sean Payton, he likes, not that there isn't room for a smaller receiver, and we see that with Marvin Mims Jr. If they bring other things to the table, but above all, he's looking for size and length.
Yes, and why do we talk about that? Because at this game, the East-West Shrine game, it was called back then, in 2006, guy named Greg Jennings there, but there was a guy named Marcus Colston out of Hofstra. So Wyoming, Nebraska to the Broncos. Maybe, just maybe. I mean, we've seen it before with Sean Payton, with a big-bodied receiver. And, that was Marcus Colston, one of his favorite players to talk about. I'm not saying, this is the new Marcus Colston, but we've seen this before. We might be seeing it again. And, Mace, it's been a fine 2 days down here. It's in Frisco and Dallas and Denton is where we've been.
This game is always illuminating. And, I was thinking about this as we were in there today during a pause in practice, because they have banners of players on the wall that they put up in the North Texas practice facility. And on one of the banners, you've got Shannon, Sharpe, and John Elway. Now, John Elway, when he came through the Shrine, 1983, there was more parity between the Shrine and the Senior Bowl. And there was a lot of pressure on John Elway to play the Shrine because it was still in its long-time home. They played it at Stanford Stadium for many years. And, of course, the Duke of Denver is a Stanford alum, and so he was going to play there. But Shannon Sharpe out of Savannah State. Justin Simmons from a major program in Boston College, but still kind of went under the radar. Justin Simmons is on the other banner because they have like a banner for like past players, and they have a banner for present players. I guess the only thing is the picture of Justin Simmons was him in a Falcon uniform, and I was like, okay, it's still not what I think of, but it tells you the kind, with Shannon Sharpe and Justin Simmons, the kind of talent that is always lurking here at this game. Mm-hmm. There are players to be had. It's just, sometimes they can get lost in some of the guys who are going to end up being fringe prospects, but when you're talking about guys as we get into day 3, guys who can help you, and you and I talked about maybe this draft is one where you're going to stack running backs and you're going to stack receivers. Tight ends, pardon me. Yep. Stack tight ends, stack running backs. 2 and 2. Yes. Do you do 2 running backs and 2 tight ends in this year's draft?
Yep.
Yes. That's possible.
Yeah.
And I think you found some options down here.
Yeah, I think you did. And it just super quick because the show went a little bit longer than we had planned, but that's fine. We're chatty blankety blankers. As we were talking to our buddy Chad Ryder from NFL Network, he had mentioned just how deep this class is because of you still have some COVID players, you have all these redshirt players, you have transfer portal players. Like, there's just this thickness. Like, your undrafted free agents years ago would have been, 6th round picks. So you've got this just depth of talent in this class. You will be able to get, and I'll even say if one of those is a UDFA, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 2 tight ends, one's a UDFA, 2 running backs, one's a UDFA. I'm fine with that. Lots of talent in this draft, and at those 2 positions specifically.
Also, if you want to play George Payton's song about more darts, is this where you take a 6th and split it into 7ths?
Maybe this type of class.
Yes. And enjoy this class because next year we're going to see the depth take a hit. This is the last year that we're going to see the COVID bump.
Yes.
In terms of number of players. We went through a little bit of a valley 2-3 years ago. Now we're on an upcycle in terms of depth of the class. Might see it come back down a little bit as guys really start to kind of, figure out the NIL landscape and it becomes kind of almost more acceptable for players to stay longer. We probably I think have the overall deepest draft class we're going to see for a couple of years.
Yep.
So
and the NFL changing, more acceptable for them to stay longer, more acceptable for them to hit the transfer portal.
Yeah.
That used to be something where guys would get dinged. Oh, well, he had a transfer. Why do you have to
now
transfer?
they don't care.
Yeah, now it's just game on. It's game on, like it is on Orange and Blue today here on a Sunday show, Mace, yes?
Yes, before we go, when you were talking about the 06 shrine, the Marcus Colston shrine, I had to look up where it was. Can you tell me?
San Antonio.
Very good.
Mm-hmm. Yep, San Antonio. And then it was in Houston.
That was the only one that was in San Antonio.
Yes. Yep.
Because it went San Antonio for a year, then Houston, then Orlando, and then it had a
Orlando
nice
for 2 years, and then nice Tampa stint.
9-year run in St. Petersburg.
Wow.
And then a couple of years in Vegas, and then here we are in Texas. I wonder where it'll be next year.
Maybe back to Vegas. Who knows?
Well, it would have stayed in Vegas if not for the Super Bowl, right?
Yes,
Like that last year. Like that definitely came.
They had a home in Vegas.
Yeah.
And they found a home in Dallas, but again, maybe it's back to Vegas.
They had a home for practice, and then it got chewed up by getting ready for a tennis tournament.
Anyone for tennis?
Yeah, I like tennis. I just watched a lot of the Australian Open, so I'm fine with it. But it was a little better to cover the practices in the Star than it was at the University of North Texas. No offense.
No offense to the mean green out there, but Mace, man, great
Good
work
stuff.
as always. We're going to hit the road for the Senior Bowl. We'll be checking in with you on a Monday show after the championship games. Full disclosure, we're going to record that. And then it's game on. We'll be in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl for our Tuesday, our Wednesday shows. Follow us on all the socials, all that.
They're doing measurements today, are they not?
I believe so,
The
yes.
Senior Bowl? Yeah, I thought so.
Yep. So we're going to wrap up here, watch some football, do another show, wrap up here, and then hit the road once again. Mace, before we're out of here, how do folks help us out on YouTube?
Like,
Comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell.
so that you
Never
miss a vid. Boom. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. Follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Hit the button. And as always, I ask you to stay frosty, baby.